Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and in today's video we're going to be replacing the radio on this 2013 Honda Accord. Now in this install we're going to show you how to remove the factory radio. We'll head over to the bench, show you the parts that we'll need including the radio, dash kit and wiring harness, and we'll come back here to get everything reinstalled. Let's get started. Now the first thing we need to just make note of, this Accord is actually equipped with a factory navigation. For the most part, as we remove the main radio and parts of that, we will lose that factory navigation. However, we'll pick it back up again as we reinstall the new radio. So we do have steering wheel volume controls and the nicer audio sound system here. So again, at the bench, we're going to show you the harnesses and everything that we'll need for that install. If you don't have the premium trim levels, again, we can make note of what you'll need for your install at home. Now I have some panel tools, a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips as well. What we're going to do is start working panels on off. So the first one here, let's go ahead and remove this trim panel that's located just right of the steering column. Next we want to do it on the other side as well. Lots of clips here. We had two stay in, but it's okay. We'll pop them out to reinstall here. Be very careful. You don't want to mar up your dash whatsoever or break the panel. Just take your time. Next, that'll expose two screws on the left and the right side of the radio. Go ahead and remove those screws. Next, we got to remove the vents up above the radio. We don't necessarily have to totally remove that for now. Open up your center console here. Alright, with that all popped on up, again, if any clips stay in it, we can remove them later and put them back in before we reinstall the panel. Okay, next here you're going to have two screws here in the center area, right here at the base of your pocket. Okay, once those two bottom screws are out, they're going to have two upper screws in the pocket that need to be pulled out. Okay, with the two screws removed from the inside, let's go ahead and pull out our little pocket here. If needed, you could probably put the key in and pull the shifter back to give you a little more space. Next, we got to pull out our CD changer here. So there are going to be two screws on the left and the right side of that. Go ahead and disconnect your harnesses off this unit. And lastly, we can remove your two screws right here in front of the radio. Once those screws are removed, you can actually move this bracket. It doesn't have to come totally out. You can pull it out. It just needs to get out of the way because it's going to expose the last two security screws, and they're usually super tight on these. So I like to use an 8mm socket and have a deep socket there to remove the face upwards, and it's the last two screws that are holding in the radio. We have so many panels removed, we can finally pull this main unit on out. Should just unsnap. Pull it totally out. And you're going to have quite a few harnesses here on the back of the unit. Go ahead and disconnect those harnesses. After all that work, we finally got this guy on out. Tons of harnesses here. We can't totally disregard this guy. There's things we have to transfer over to the new unit. So at this point in time, we're done here in the car. Let's head over to the bench to show you the parts that we're going to need for our install. All right, so we're here at the bench. Now the parts that we're going to need to replace our factory OEM unit. First and foremost is the chosen radio that we've gone with. It's doubled in. It's the Sony XAV-AX5500. Features Apple Carplay, Android Auto, also WebLink, which is pretty cool. And to accommodate this new Sony in the factory location, we do need a specific dash kit for this year Accord. Since we have navigation, the nav and non-nav units are just a little bit different. We do have a non-nav Crosstour version on the channel, which we can link down in the description. This is the nav version. Now we can also link various parts based on your trim level. In the dash kit needed for our nav replacement is the Metro 95-7807. We need an antenna adapter, which is the Metro 40-HD10. Since we have the factory upgraded amplified system in this, we do need the Metro 70-1730. If you don't have the upgraded amplified system and have bass trim with the bass audio, you're going to have the basic harness, and we can link that also in the description. Now, we do have steering wheel volume controls, so we're going to use this PAC C4RAD harness adapter, which allows us to retain those steering wheel volume controls to this new unit. And finally, the customer wants us to put in a flush mount USB and USB Type-C input that's also compatible with CarPlay, which will run and make accessing the wired CarPlay off the unit super easy. First thing we need to do is grab a harness adapter and the harness that goes with our radio. Today we're going to be soldering. We're going to make those soldered connections, and then we'll need to put the radio and assemble our dash. Alright, so we started preparing our wiring. Now this is our main harness. Now, because we have the factory amplifier, we don't actually have to wire up any of our speaker connectors, because we're going to use the low-level outputs of our radio to supply our amplifier the signal it needs to play. If you don't have the factory amplifier, instead of RCAs, you'll have speaker leads, which you'll just connect directly to your speaker wires, color for color. We're going to be connecting color for color, our harness up here, and we have steering wheel volume controls, so we have our harness that we'll have to tee into that. We'll show you a little bit more specifically how we're going to do that here in a moment. And finally, we also have our powered wire off our antenna harness adapter. That's the powered circuit to help your reception. We're going to hook that up as well. And so what we're going to be doing today, like I mentioned before, is soldering. Don't just twist and tape or use wire nuts. Those are just not designed for an automotive application. At a bare minimum, use butt connectors, or even better, some crimp caps to make your connection today. So let's go ahead and start soldering things up. Okay, so we finished soldering up all our connections here. Really, for our Sony today, it's going to be color for color. Our antenna adapter has that blue amplified wire. We just tied it into our accessory, just so it's going to get that amplification as soon as the car is turned on. So we teed into there. We added an extra accessory wire for in case we want to power a backup camera. Our steering wheel control module, the red wire is our power wire for the module, so we teed that in there as well so we can power our steering wheel control module. We added an additional remote turn-on wire in case we had an external amplifier down the road. And then looking at all our grounds here, we have quite a few grounds. Our steering wheel control module, one of the two black wires need to be grounded, so we added that in there. We also added an extra ground in case our backup camera needs one. And we also grounded the parking brake wire, which is the green one. For Sony's, we can still do that. We can simply just ground it. We don't need any sort of bypass. So we did that there. So those are our ground bundle. But what we're going to do at this point in time is move our heat shrink up and over those connections. We'll shrink them down with the heat gun. We also added a big piece of heat shrink on our speaker connections, because again, we have the factory amplifier, which are using RCAs. So because we're not using the internal amp in the radio, we're going to cap those off with a piece of heat shrink just so they don't ground out on anything. With those connections all nice and insulated now, we like to wrap our harness a little Tessa tape just to give it a little more protection in the dash. You'll also notice that we haven't hooked up the rest of our steering wheel control wires. We'll cover that in a minute. They are not available here in this harness. Unfortunately, it's not pinned through here. There's other various harnesses in the car that we'll have to make specific connections to in order for our module here to function correctly with the new radio. So we'll cover that here in a few moments. Alright, so we finished with our harness here. We use a little Tessa tape, high temperature tape to loom up the harness here. This end plugs into the steering wheel control input of the radio. We have our antenna adapter. We have our audio outputs to the factory amplifier. We have our reverse gear trigger wire because we're adding a backup camera, which we'll do in a separate video. We also have an accessory wire hanging off to power that camera. We finished up this end, which is our steering control module. Now, since we're doing a Sony, we went to the PAX website, so we know how to set our dip switches. And according to the website, we have these 4 down, these 4 up, and then these 3 up, and the right one down. Head over to PAX website and do the C4 RAD. Basically, it'll walk you through the process, and we can link more information on how to do that in the description. And then finally here, the last connections we need to make for our steering wheel controls, because they're not available in the main harness. So we'll need to go into the vehicle to make those manual connections. So we'll show you where to make these connections here in a bit. So let's set this guy off to the side and start working on our dash kit. All right, so it's time to now work on our dash kit assembly here. Basically, it's the same size bezel as the factory radio, but there are elements here like our buttons that we'll have to transfer over to the new kit. We don't have to do much else. We can leave the main radio, but these buttons will screw into these same locations as they were on the factory one. Let's go ahead and follow our instructions by disassembling the 2 climate controls on the left and the right side. Okay, so we transferred over our HVAC controls here. Now, we used the new screws that came with our kit to mount these in. The old screws we actually just put back into our factory radio, just in case down the road we need them again. And we transferred over our little pieces here, which will actually clip on right to the factory mounting points. Unfortunately, this came broken in the kit, so we can't mount this side, but we should be fine without it. So we'll go ahead and put this back on the factory radio. And we have 4 screws left here for the top part of the HVAC controls as well as the bottom part. These are our 4 anchor points for our radio brackets. So let's go ahead and get now the radio seated within the kit itself. Okay, so we went ahead and got our radio mounted up in the kit. Because it is a single DIN chassis, even though it's a double DIN screen, we didn't need a whole lot to mount it. It's really nice and light. Now, unfortunately, this kit doesn't come with anything to replace the disk drive, our disk changer in the center console. That's going to have to go back in, and it becomes obsolete. That piece won't be able to be integrated within the new radio, unfortunately. Our harness is done, our dash kit is done. We are good to go at this point of time. Let's head back to the car to start getting everything reinstalled. Okay, so we're back here in the car. Now, with our harnesses here, remember, there were a few additional connections for our steering wheel control module that we needed to make that weren't available in our main harness here. We plugged in our main harness, but we had our white with a black stripe and white with a red stripe and a solid black wire. 4 additional connections that we have to make back here. Connection number 1 and 2 are located right here in our main harness. Unfortunately, it's not pinned. So we have a brown and a pink wire, and I'll put the pins up there for you. The brown wire needs to be grounded. Pink wire needs to be connected to the solid white. What we did is we just stripped the shielding back here, threaded our wire through it, and then soldered on. And then we need to tape up that connection. So again, white goes to this pink, black goes to this brown. So there's the first 2 connections. Connection number 3 is in this 16-pin harness. And we have a brown wire in this pin location. That brown wire needs to go to our white black of our adapter. So again, strip the wire back, exposing the copper. We threaded our wire through that like threading a needle. We soldered on, and we have to tape up the connection. Now that takes care of these buttons up here. However, these 2 buttons are controlled by the Bluetooth module, and the harness isn't here. Instead, it's up underneath here. This is our Bluetooth module, if it's so equipped in your car. If you have these buttons, you probably have that Bluetooth module. Now, there's a harness there down below, and we're gonna get a little bit lower so you can see the last connection that we have to connect into. So our Bluetooth module harness is this guy. It just unplugs from the bottom of the module. And pin number 2, which is there, pin number 2, is that light blue wire. And same thing, what we did is we stripped the wire back, threaded our wire through it, and now we need to solder on. Now obviously that white with a red stripe wire in the dash cavity is not going to be long enough. So we used just this little 20 gauge wire, extra wire that we had left over. And we're going to use that to extend that white with the red stripe wire, and we're going to run it all the way into the stereo cavity. If you want those Bluetooth buttons to work, that's the last connection you have to make. All right, so we're back here in the car for final assembly of our radio. Now with our connections here, we obviously plugged in our main harness. We got that all installed. Got the other end plugged into our radio. It's a plug and play. Small base harness is connected as well. We connected our antenna adapter. It just needs to go to the back of the radio. And you saw us also make our 4 additional wired connections for our steering wheel controls. So with those all made, now we connected our Bluetooth mic, ran our USB cables. We're gonna go ahead and start getting the radio back in. We also got all our RCAs connected. White's going to be front left, gray's going to be front right, green is rear left, purple is rear right. So we connect into those RCA pre-outs. And our subwoofer, we marked it with an S there, is in the sub output as well. We connected our WR input, our wired remote from our steering wheel control module, got our mic connected, got our USB connected as well. Both of them, we ran our harnesses down and got our antenna connected. So go ahead and start tucking everything down into the dash. All right, so we got this in here. Radio boots up. Everything seems to be working great. Let's go ahead and test our steering wheel controls. Yep, they're working great. We got them all set up exactly the way the website told us to do so. Hit mode, perfect. And then channel up, channel down, that's all working. Buttons on the steering wheel for Bluetooth are working. Mind you, keep that harness unplugged. Don't plug your harness back in to the Bluetooth module, or else this won't actually respond, but it looks like it's responding when the harness is undone. We also did a backup camera in here. That seems to be working great too. Okay, so at this point in time, our HVAC system is working. We can go ahead and continue reassembling the dash. Alright, so radio's all back in. Got everything all reassembled, everything programmed here. That's about it for this install. Now, like I mentioned before, we did a backup camera on this vehicle as well. So if you want to see that camera install, we'll link that video down in the description, which walks you step by step on how to integrate that camera to your new aftermarket radio. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to hit the like button if you like what you saw, and don't forget to subscribe to post great content on the channel all the time, and we will see you in the next video.